right, hello everyone, and welcome to part 6 of how to write a sentence. We're going to do things a little bit differently today. I'm not going to show my face. Try your best not to cry into your pillow tonight over that, but we'll just be looking at punctuation, so let's just jump into it. We're going to go over some different types of punctuation. I have categorized them into a few groups. One of them is enders, and that comes at the end of a sentence, connectors, flyers, and interrupters. So let me go into what all of those are. Let's start with enders first. So an ender comes at the end of a sentence. Period, question mark, exclamation point. So let's just take a quick look and review. So a period, or also known as a stop, is for statements, facts, and general sentences. It's also for decimal numbers. And here are some examples. He lived 3 streets down the road next to the haunted post office. I never liked sushi. If I had to listen to this old guy speak for another 2.76 seconds, I was going to lose my mind. All right, so that's just a quick review. And question marks are for questions, and you can also use them for accusations. So for example, why did I say such a stupid thing to such a gorgeous man? That's just a question. It's one I ask myself a lot. And the second one is, do you think I'm stupid? So that's more of an accusation. And the third one is both an accusation and a question. Are you insane? He asked. Why didn't you call me? And the next one we have is the exclamation point. So to use an exclamation point, use it for high energy statements or to show surprise, shock, and disgust. Here are some examples. I missed you so much. And there it was, treasure, piles of gold and jewels, like in one of those pirate movies. And could you imagine me, married to a Montague? So I would recommend not using these very often, especially if you're a fiction writer. Let's move on to connectors. So connectors, different punctuation that will connect your sentences or statements together. First we have a colon, then the semicolon, commas, and a hyphen / en dash. Now they are different. The one on the left here is the hyphen. The one on the right is an en dash. As you can see, they're different lengths, so they're kind of confusing. Let me go into that. So first, let's start with colon. The colon is usually used for lists, or it's used for a special emphasis. For example, there was only one thing I hated in this world, algebra tests. So that would be the special emphasis. And the second sentence, I only asked him to pick up 3 things, a rope, a knife, and hydrogen peroxide. So that would be your list. A semicolon, when you want to use a semicolon, I actually use semicolons a lot, to be honest. I think it's because I have such a long reading background of classical novels and Gothic novels, and they love semicolons. So I use these more than regular people, but you can use them. They are very useful. You can use them to organize multiple lists, which is very helpful if you write nonfiction. You can also use them to connect 2 sentences together, and the latter piece of the sentence is usually dependent on the first. And you can also use it for transitional phrases when you use however, for example, therefore. So here are some examples. There are 3 major cities in Korea. Seoul, the capital, semicolon. Busan, the city with the best beaches, semicolon. And Incheon, the city with the 4th best airport in the world. So this will break up the sentence to be clearer. If I just write Seoul, the capital, comma, Busan, the city with the best beaches, it's actually harder to read. And so this kind of breaks it up into a nice little list. And then the second sentence we have is, I hate the Seoul subway in the morning. There are never any seats. So the second part of the sentence after the semicolon is dependent on the first. And the last one that we have here is, there are many street foods to try in South Korea. For example, hotdog and tteokbokki. This is for a transitional phrase. Commas are pretty much evil. There's really no other way around it. They have so many rules, and I don't understand why. Commas are really difficult. They're difficult for English native speakers. They're difficult for everybody. I feel like most of the time when I put in commas, I take them out later, or if I take out commas, I put them back later. They're really difficult. So I'm going to kind of breeze through it. My recommendation is to have a professional editor just fix all your commas for you, honestly. But in order to make your writing as clear as possible, it's best to figure out where to put commas when you write your own drafts. And let me just say that for commas, you do not put them where you pause when you speak. I know many people that do that. They assume that if they're speaking a line and they pause somewhere while they're speaking, they put a comma as if they're speaking, but writing and speaking are not the same. So, in order to be clear, use commas for, number one, longer time phrases at the beginning of a sentence usually. And number two, to interrupt a sentence to clarify something. I'll show you examples of these in a second. 3 for lists. 4, between multiple adjectives, and I'll talk about that also. Number 5, to connect two standalone sentences that use and, but, so, those types of sentences. And I've totally forgotten what they're called, even though it's my job to remember what they're called. Compound sentences, I believe. I think that's right. My coffee's not strong enough today. Number 6, in tag questions. I'll show you a tag question in a second. Number 7, in dialogue before a dialogue tag. Number 8, in dates. Number 9, before addressing a person. Number 10, introductory adverbs, greetings, and answers. Good grief. Okay, so let me show you examples, because you probably fell asleep during that list somewhere. So this is, number 1 is an example of time, after breakfast, comma. So after a time period, we went to the park. And then number 2 is an example of interrupting a sentence. My teacher, Mr. Smith, used to play in a rock band. And number 3, today I bought eggs, milk, and cheese. There's a list. Number 4, he was a thin, frail man. So if you use more than one adjective, which 2 is usually the normal, 3 is okay, but it's pushing it, and probably never use 4 adjectives because that just seems ridiculous when you're speaking and when you're writing. So the trick with putting it between adjectives is you can say he was a thin and frail man. So wherever and can go between adjectives, you put a comma. He was a thin and frail man. Or he was a thin, comma, frail man. Both of them work. It really depends on what your rhythm is and what the mood and tone is, but it really doesn't matter too much. You can use either one. And then number 5, I went to the store, but my brother went to the bank. So these are 2 different sentences combined with the word but. And then number 6 is an example of tag questions. You love French fries, don't you? So that would be a tag question. More examples, hold on. I ate blueberries, he said. So this is an example of using a comma in dialogue. You do not put a period or stop here. It will be a comma. The period goes at the end after he said. And actually, I'm going to go over dialogue tags and punctuation in my next lesson, so hang around for that. And then number 8 is an example of dates. The Titanic sank Monday, April 15th, 1912, so I need commas between the day of the week and the date. And then number 9, I didn't ask for your opinion, Paul, so I'm adding someone's name at the end there, direction. And then number 10, we usually put a comma after yes and no, or greetings. So no, I don't like sushi. Hello, Mr. Smith, how are you today? Finally, I made it to the front of the line. So those are all the examples of commas. Thanks for sticking it out for that one. And then let's go into hyphen and end dash. So first, let's talk about hyphens. So a hyphen connects a prefix to a word. Prefix is just a fancy word for a word that comes before a word, or half a word usually that comes before a word. I'll show you an example. And a hyphen also connects 2 words to each other. And a hyphen can also show a stutter. This is pretty helpful in fiction writing. So here are some examples. My ex-boyfriend always made brunch on Sundays. So you can see X is the prefix. This is half a word. And then 2 words together, deep fried. I love deep fried Oreos. That is a true statement. Deep fried Oreos are delicious. If you haven't tried them, just go to the South, because you can have deep fried anything in the South. Also, a lot of world famous Korean celebrities live in Gangnam. So also just 2 words that you can hyphenate together. And a stutter. I'm not scared. So you can show a stutter that way. Now let's talk about the end dash. So the end dash is a little bit longer. and it shows the range of two things, or it shows the result of a vote, or it shows close relationships between two things. And an en dash has no spaces between it. So if you look at these examples, I work 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., so there's no space here. After a close match, we won the game 5-6. Also, no spaces. There is no safe way to cross the North Korean-South Korean border. All right. Let's move on to flyers. So that'll be your apostrophes and your quotation marks. Now, I will say that there's actually a difference between the way that Americans use these and the way that the UK uses these. I'm going to show you the American way. I have the most confidence teaching that. Although I will go over in my next lesson when we talk about dialogue, I will go over how it looks different in formatting in the British way as well. But we'll just focus on using this for the American way for now. I hope it's still useful to you. So usually we use apostrophes to show possession, and that will be true in both British and American English, and to show missing letters. So let me show you some examples. I am is I'm. You are is your. All right, so that will be an example of missing letters. We're taking out letters and just putting in the apostrophe. And we use this a lot in dialogue. So like, do you got anything to eat? If you take out the G, which I don't think I did when I just gave the example, do you got anything to eat? I usually just say, you got anything? You'll see that a lot in a lot of children's fiction for sure. And then the second one is possession. Jonathan's guitar sat in the corner. The dust, a reminder of how long he'd been gone. So that's a super dramatic example there, but Jonathan's, it belongs to Jonathan. And then here's one that's often confusing. I got 1 day's supply of coffee and he got 5 days supply of coffee. And so this is actually a possession of the days. I got 1 day's of coffee is basically what the apostrophe is doing. It belongs to the day, and then if I put the apostrophe at the end, right here, like with 5 days, if I put it at the end, it belongs to all 5 days. So this is 1 day, so it's apostrophe S. This is 5 days, so it's S apostrophe because it belongs to many days. And now let's move on to quotation marks. So quotation marks show someone talking. This will be American formatting, like I said before. Actually, it's reversed in British formatting, but I'll go over that in the next lesson. I won't go over that here today. So it shows someone talking. It shows a questionable definition of a word. You can use italics to do the same and to quote somebody. So, for example, try this quesadilla. He said the goat cheese sends it to another level. So you can see someone is talking. And like I said before, if you're doing British formatting, this will be reversed. These will actually be apostrophes, not quotation marks. My grandmother used to say, getting old isn't for the weak, so it's a direct quote. And her boss was her office husband, but could never be any more than that. So this is more of like kind of an ironic statement. It shows a questionable definition of a word or just kind of a slang. And here's a bonus, how to quote someone in a quote. So use quotations for the person speaking, then use apostrophes to quote within the quote. So here's an example. I talked to him yesterday, John said. He said he was meeting a friend from back home. Again, this will be reversed in British formatting, but in American formatting, we'll do the quotation marks and then an apostrophe. And then my favorite quote is, I think, therefore I am, from Descartes. Again, also reversed in British formatting. So here's the interrupters. So if hyphen and en dash wasn't enough, we also have an em dash. It's em because it's longer than the en dash. And then we have parentheses. We have ellipses, which are one of my favorite types of punctuation, and brackets. So let me tell you about the em dash. So the em dash replaces commas, colons, or parentheses for extra emphasis, and it can be used for asides or extra information that can be omitted from the sentence completely. So there was only one thing I hated in this world, algebra tests. So if you remember before, we used a colon, and so that also put emphasis on it. This one puts more emphasis on it. And then I went to the repair shop, the same one Uncle Lou used to love, and they said it would cost about $400 to fix. So this is an aside. It's not important. I can take it out completely and the sentence is fine. For example, I went to the car repair shop and they said it would cost $400 to fix. All right, let's go to parentheses. Use parentheses for aside information or afterthoughts and for clarification. So here's an example. I went to the car repair shop, the same one Uncle Lou used to love, and they said it would cost about $400 to fix. So again, this is an aside, it's extra information. And then we sat around the campfire and told ghost stories. Sort of cliche, yes, until my dad called. So again, an afterthought. Our neighbor, the one with the red Corvette, bought us a batch of cookies yesterday. So this is for clarification. And ellipses. I love ellipses. So let's look at ellipses. They're for long pauses, for trailing off without finishing your sentence, and for omitted pieces in quotes. So you, dramatic pause. You were there, weren't you? And then here's the second example, but if you're hurt, and this is trailing off, so they're not finishing their sentence, but they're also not getting interrupted. So it's just more, but if you're hurt, and then the other person speaks, I'll be more hurt if you reject me. And so we also use it if you take out a piece of a quote, which is very useful when you are doing any sort of paper. So the full quote, the original quote is, we never lose the old favorites, they're always with us, we just sort of accumulate them. And so if I quote it, but I don't want to put the whole thing, I can say we never lose old favorites, ellipses, here are some missing pieces. We just sort of accumulate them. All right, and brackets. Primarily used in nonfiction for quotes, or nonfiction and quotes, I should say, and shows context for the reader, shows extra emphasis by the writer. Here are some examples. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, italics added. So usually if we quote something and we put something in italics, we will add brackets and put italics added. So this is the note that I'm writing to the reader. I have put the emphasis on and the earth. And this is a quote from Mary Midgley, who quotes Carl Jung in this really good book. I recommend it if you like reading about human evil, which is one of my favorite pastimes. Painful though it is, this unwelcome self-knowledge is in itself a gain. So the previous sentence talks about unwelcome self-knowledge, but this quote doesn't. So I need to reference back what the context is, the original context of the quote. So that's why I have to use the brackets. Okay, so now let me show you how we put it all together, and I'm going to show you a scene from one of my books. I won't read the whole thing to you, but I will show you all of the little punctuations that I used in this scene from my book. So here I'm quoting the book. Before, this piece, it shows that Nikos is the one who's talking, but since I'm showing it to you now, I need to use the brackets because you don't know who he is. Originally this says, once we reached the dock, he held out his hand, but I need context, so Nikos. And then we have the quotes, commas, could not is now couldn't. What else? Cyrus, question, you came down to the lake, so this is kind of dramatic. And then the next part that we have is, my dear, so a pet name and then a comma. Invite you to, and then he interrupts himself in the sentence. My dear, I came to officially invite you to, good grief, why are you wet? Was this Nikos doing? Nikos. That's a whole lot of, it's a question and then an accusation. So interrupting, question, accusation. And all of that comes across through the punctuation. Here, Nikos pointed his finger at me. Tell him that I had nothing to do with this. I pursed my lips. Well, you did hit the gas pretty hard. And then she doesn't finish her sentence, the main character. So these are some examples of how you would use punctuation in order to communicate a certain type of mood or feeling or how the people are expressing their sentences. So the question is, how do you decide what to use? Because there's the hyphen, the em dash, the n dash, the colon, the semicolon, and it's kind of confusing. It's up to you as the writer. You can do whatever you'd like, but here is some extra help So there was only one thing I hated in this world, algebra tests. There was only thing I hated in this world, algebra tests. So same sentence, but the first one puts a stronger emphasis on algebra tests. The second one is not as dramatic. And then here's another sentence that I showed earlier. I hate the Seoul subway in the morning. There are never any seats. So the M dash shows an extra emphasis on why the speaker hates the subway. And the first one, it's like emotional levels are the same. The second one, the emotional level kind of heightens. And the next one, ellipses or the M dash for trailing off of sentences. So if you look at the first one and the second one, these are actually different events. The ellipses means that the person trailed off by themselves. They didn't finish their own sentence. And then the M dash shows that they're interrupted, so they got cut off. And then here's the car repair shop example, one with the parentheses and one with the M dash. The parentheses makes it, I always think of it more of like a whisper, like a side whisper or an unimportant note. The M dash usually means it's something worth mentioning. So there's a reason I'm mentioning it as an aside, but it's still an aside. I can still take it out. Okay, and so that is it. I know punctuation is not the most entertaining of subjects, but it actually has a lot of effect on your writing. So let's just recap real fast. And so we had the enders, period, stop, question mark, exclamation point. We had the connectors, a hyphen and it connects two words, and N dash connects two things in a range. A colon starts a list or adds emphasis. Semicolon connects a dependent idea to an independent idea. So the second part of the sentence is a dependent idea. It requires the first part. A comma does a lot of things, too many things, in fact. And then flyers, you have the apostrophe and the quotation marks. And like I said before, that's actually reversed in British formatting. I will go over that in my next lesson about dialogue. Interrupters. M dash shows extra emphasis or someone being cut off. Parentheses is for aside information and clarification. Ellipses, dramatic pause, someone not finishing their sentence, and brackets show omitted information for clarity. So that was part 6. The next class will be about dialogue. I will show you about action tags and dialogue tags, as well as proper punctuation for dialogue. So I will go over that. And then I will also go over the British and American formatting differences for dialogue as well. So I will see you next time. I hope this was useful. Leave a like and subscribe if it was, and I'll see you guys next time.